Kublai Khan, a name that resonates with power and conquest, stands as one of history's mighty rulers. He was born as the grandson of the legendary Genghis Khan, and he not only inherited a lineage of fearless warriors but also the ambition to expand the already gigantic Mongol Empire. While Genghis Khan laid the foundation for it, it was Kublai who took the empire to new heights. For example, he established the Yuan dynasty in China and became its first emperor. This fusion of Mongol warrior with heritage with the advanced Chinese civilization made Kublai Khan a unique figure in world history that shaped the Asian continent even to this day. But beyond his achievements, Kublai was a ruthless military strategist. He was known to be a shrewd diplomatist and merciless in warfare. As we dive deep into his journey as a ruler, it becomes absolutely clear that crossing Kublai Khan as an opponent was not something you wanted to do, because those who dared to oppose him were met with tactics that can only be described as terrifying. From psychological warfare to sheer physical annihilation, Kublai's strategies were as brilliant as they were horrifying. That's why today we take a look at the horrifying things Kublai Khan did to his enemies and unveil the dark side of a leader whose thirst for power knew no limits. But before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss another topic that was never even talked about in history class. Born in 1215, Kublai Khan was born as the grandson of Genghis Khan, and because of that, from a young age, he was immersed in the traditions of Mongol warfare. He witnessed firsthand the strategies and tactics that made the Mongols feared all around the world. Kublai's first own military campaigns were marked by both unimaginable triumphs and devastating setbacks. However, these early experiences on the battlefield were invaluable, teaching him the small details of warfare, from managing logistics to understanding the psyche of his enemies. Every battle, whether victory or defeat, was a lesson, shaping him into the world-class strategist we know today. He learned the importance of adaptability, realizing that while the Mongol tactics were effective, they needed to evolve to meet the challenges of diverse terrains and new opponents. But probably the most significant influence on Kublai's military strategies was the legacy of Genghis Khan. Genghis was not just a conqueror, but a visionary. His ability to unite the Mongol tribes and his strategies of swift cavalry attacks, espionage, and psychological warfare were legendary. Kublai, inheriting this legacy, was absolutely aware of the weight of his grandfather's name and the expectations it carried. Therefore, he studied all of Genghis' campaigns, drawing inspiration from his successes and learning from his mistakes. However, this legacy was also a double-edged sword for Kublai. On the one side, it provided him with a blueprint for conquest, but it also casted a long shadow. Therefore, Kublai knew he had to carve his own path by merging the traditional Mongol tactics with his own innovations. As he rose to power, it became evident that while he revered his grandfather's legacy, Kublai was 100% determined to expand upon it, pushing the boundaries of the Mongol Empire to new horizons and leaving his own mark on history. One of the military tactics he mastered very early in his career, and what would become his most feared weapon, was the art of siege warfare. See, the Mongols were traditionally known for their swift cavalry charges on open plains. However, Kublai recognized the importance of conquering fortified cities and strongholds to truly establish dominance over a region. Over the years, his mastery of the siege was unparalleled. Kublai and his generals would meticulously plan their sieges, studying the defenses of a city, its supply lines, and the morale of its defenders. This detailed planning was often the key to his success, allowing him to exploit the weaknesses of his enemies. To make these sieges even more effective, Kublai Khan employed advanced siege weapons, some of which were revolutionary for their time. For example, the trebuchet, a massive catapult capable of hurling large stones or fireballs over city walls, was a staple in his siege arsenal. The way these catapults were designed was so they were able to be constructed right on the battlefield using local resources, and they could cause significant damage to the enemy's fortifications. Additionally, with the help of Chinese engineering, Kublai also had access to early forms of gunpowder and cannons. These weapons gave the Mongols a firepower advantage and allowed them to breach walls that were thought to be undestroyable. However, it was the aftermath of these sieges that truly showcased the horrifying nature of Kublai Khan's warfare. Cities that resisted were often subjected to brutal revenges, In some cases, entire populations were massacred, with survivors either enslaved or forcibly relocated. Looking at it from a psychological standpoint, these acts of brutality were not just an expression of vengeance, but were also strategic. Kublai believed in making examples out of cities that resisted, ensuring that the tales of their fates would spread, demoralizing other potential resistors and often leading them to surrender without a fight. But this was just one part of his broader strategy of psychological warfare, a tactic that would become the most effective weapon in his arsenal. If you believe the Mongols were already brutal under the leadership of Genghis Khan, you need to think again, because under Kublai's leadership, they cultivated a reputation for unparalleled brutality. Tales of their conquests, often exaggerated, spread like wildfire across continents. Stories of entire cities being razed to the ground, of rivers running red with blood, and of towers built from human skulls were told by Mongols and by terrified survivors. Whether these tales were true or false didn't matter. Their existence alone and the possibility of them being true made everyone fear encountering them. This psychological effect led many cities to choose to surrender without resistance, preferring submission over destruction. But Kublai didn't just rely on word of mouth as psychological method, as he also used some more direct methods. For example, captured enemies were often used as human shields in battles, placing them in the front lines to prevent the enemies from fighting effectively. The sight of loved ones or respected leaders was a devastating blow to the morale of opposing forces, often causing hesitation to fight back. Another tactic was the forced march of prisoners. These unfortunate souls were bound and shackled and then paraded in front of the Mongol army as they approached enemy territories. The message was clear: resist, and this will be your fate. As I said earlier, these displays were not just about showcasing Mongol dominance, but also about breaking the spirit of those who might consider standing against them. But Kublai Khan's strategies weren't limited to psychological tactics alone. When deemed necessary, he resorted to acts of sheer, incomparable violence, leaving behind tales of devastation that would be remembered for centuries. One of the most horrifying things of Kublai's reign was the annihilation of entire cities and regions that resisted or betrayed him. Perhaps the most notorious of these massacres took place at Nishapur, which is modern-day Iran. In retaliation for the death of a Mongol leader, Kublai troops were ordered to slaughter every inhabitant of the city. The numbers vary as there are not a lot of reports left, but some accounts suggest that hundreds of thousands were killed. The scale of the massacre was so vast that, according to some reports, the soldiers were given the task of ensuring the complete extermination of the city's population. The aftermath was a city completely silent and empty. But why resort to such extreme measures? For Kublai and the Mongols, it was about more than just vengeance. For them, it was a demonstration of power and a warning to others about the consequences of resistance against Mongol forces. Yet the machinery of the Mongol Empire didn't run on fear alone. The vast projects and the sprawling cities that marked Kublai's reign required manpower. And often this manpower was sourced from the very populations they conquered. Captured enemies, rather than always being put to the sword, were frequently enslaved. These enslaved individuals were then put to various tasks. Some were conscripted into the Mongol military, serving in the lower ranks, and often placed in the most dangerous positions during battles. Others were used for manual labor, working on construction projects, farms, or mines. Their skills and expertise were exploited by the Mongol overlords, and the only reward they got was to survive. One of the most significant projects that utilized slavery was the construction of Kublai Khan's capital city, Chengdu. This grand city, with its palaces, gardens, and fortifications, was a testament to Kublai's vision and grandeur. But behind its magnificent facades lays the sweat and suffering of countless slaves that were forced to bring the Khan's dreams to life. The conditions these slaves met were often harsh. They worked long hours with minimal rest, faced regular physical punishment, and were provided with meager rations. Their lives were marked by hardship with little hope of freedom. The Mongols, while appreciating the value of their labor, viewed them as expendable resources. Injuries, illnesses, and deaths were common, and those who could no longer work were often discarded without a second thought. As you can imagine, these tactics made him a lot of enemies, and while Kublai Khan's military might is often highlighted as a way to secure his power, one of the less discussed weapons he used was the art of espionage. Kublai understood that raw power needed to be complemented by intelligence and information. Therefore, he established an extensive spy network that spanned across his entire empire. These spies often operated in the shadows and gathered intelligence on potential rebellions, the movement of rival armies, and the plans of foreign kingdoms. They played a crucial role in keeping Kublai informed, allowing him to make strategic decisions based on this information. Basically, they were the eyes and ears of his leadership. However, espionage wasn't just about gathering intelligence. He also employed the darker side of this craft, assassinations. When faced with threats that couldn't be dealt with openly, assassins were dispatched to eliminate rivals or potential rebels. These assassins were trained in stealth and combat and were experts in carrying out their missions without drawing any attention. Their targets often included influential leaders or figures whose removal would bring chaos in the enemy ranks. This would become one of the cornerstones of Kublai military campaigns. Before launching an attack or laying siege to a city, the Khan's spies would infiltrate the area, gathering information on defenses, troop numbers, and potential weaknesses. As you can imagine, this intelligence was invaluable, and it allowed the Mongol forces to tailor their strategies accordingly. And while Kublai Khan is often characterized by tales of his ruthlessness, just talking about this would be oversimplified. Beneath his wars was an extremely intelligent diplomat who understood that the sword was not always the most effective weapon. There were numerous instances where he chose the path of negotiation over warfare, recognizing that endless conquest could drain the resources of the empire and not every battle was worth the bloodshed. Kublai often extended the olive branch to potential enemies. These diplomatic scenarios took various forms, from marriage alliances to trade agreements, and even cultural exchanges. One notable example of his diplomatic intelligence was his relationship with the Song dynasty of China. Instead of endless warfare, Kublai engaged in a series of negotiations, eventually leading to the peaceful surrender of his enemies. This not only saved countless lives, but also facilitated a smoother integration of the Song territories into the Yuan dynasty. Kublai Khan's approach to leadership was a balancing act between instilling fear and gaining respect. While his enemies were undoubtedly terrified of his anger, his allies often held him in high regard. He promoted religious tolerance, patronized arts and sciences, and even engaged with foreign emissaries, such as the famed Venetian traveler Marco Polo. These actions showcased a ruler who was not just a warrior but also a statesman, keen on building a legacy that went beyond the battlefield. Thank you for joining us today at Past Perspective as we looked at the horrifying things Kublai Khan did to his enemies. If you never want to miss another topic that was never even talked about in history class, make sure to subscribe to our channel. With that being said, thanks for watching, and until next time.